Welcome to Tentative Title with Tim. This is a podcast about creativity, about process, about filmmaking, and about screenwriting. Welcome, everybody, back to the podcast. I hope everybody out there is doing well, wherever you happen to be in the world at this moment as you're listening to this podcast. So, I have to admit that I am a bit immature because of the fact that this is episode 69 and the little immature self is giggling a little bit because that's just how immature I am. But I actually have a reason for it because in this episode, I'm going to talk about sex. No, I'm not going to give the sex talk. I'm not going to try to give advice. I'm not going to solve any of those kinds of problems, but I will talk about the, sex as it's portrayed in television and film. And if you don't know, as much as it seems like the actors involved in a sex scene are very much like out of control and very passionate about what they're doing, it's usually just an act. Like they are, acting as if they're really into each other. Of course, there has to be some kind of chemistry involved between the two actors and for it to be believable. But when you break down a scene, and you look at the way in which it's put together, it's actually very boring the way that a sex scene is filmed. And the way you can see that is by, if you are watching one and you can think of every single time they cut the angle to another angle, that is a director saying cut, and that's the actors putting on robes, stepping away, and maybe having some tea or coffee, and then being called back to set to maybe do another setup. So when you think about it like that, it's like it takes the it takes the hotness out of the sex scene, of course, when you think about it in terms of this mechanics of, the actors did a couple seconds of kissing and then they cut and then they stepped away, and then, maybe a half an hour later when they reset the camera or the lights, or they had to fix something, or they had to do hair and makeup again, or they had to do some fixes, that they had to go back and then they did the next part of what happens in that sequence. So thinking about it that way, it makes a lot of sense to do it that way because of the fact that you don't want your actors to be distracted by the fact that they're they're doing something that is natural to human beings. Obviously, I mean, that's how all of us got here. But it allows for a crafting of a scene that, when it's put together, can be really really hot. I mean, that's the only way I can describe it. But with that, there has been a rule that has been put in place. I don't exactly know how long it's been in place, because it seems like just recently it's been a role that has been on set. But it's called the intimacy coordinator. And with that, especially with there were stories coming out where it seemed like a lot of people were feeling like they were being put in scenes where they didn't feel comfortable, but they were doing the scenes anyway because they knew that it was going to be good for the movie to for it to make money, or to kind of like there were like any number of motivations why they went through with doing the scenes, whether or not they felt comfortable with it. But this new rule was this new role was put in to make sure that when these scenes happened, that everything was mapped out. Everybody knew what they were doing, and that there were no surprises when it came to anybody involved in those scenes. So, and with that, it's there have been plenty of stories in the past where it's like there's a movie that came out and it's like, oh, these two actors are actually like for real, like having sex, and oh, you got to check it out. And it wasn't to the point of like pornography, because that's a different classification, obviously, but it was close enough that like it kind of blurred the line, because the film itself was not supposed to be, it wasn't supposed to be pornographic. It was supposed to be two actors who were simulating having sex on screen, and it ended up not being the case. So there have been a few stories here and there of that happening, and I'm sure that's why this role was ultimately created after decades and decades of just like of not having it in place. So it all made sense. But even with that, it's like the set during a sex scene is usually very small. And when I say small, I mean like there are only a few people on set, like the essential people, the cameraman, the cinematographer, the director, the intimacy coordinator, and just anybody who needs to be there for the scene is there for the scene. But if there's a crew member that doesn't need to be there, they're like usually the case is that they will get everybody off set who's not supposed to be there, and to make sure that the actors feel comfortable, that that what they're doing, what they're doing is very vulnerable, and so to allow giving the atmosphere of being as comfortable as possible, so that the actors are able to to just relax. I mean, is basically what it comes down to. Like, if you have like 100 people staring at you while you're naked and you're trying to perform this scene, it can be intimidating, and it can be it could be one of those things where you're just like, you don't feel comfortable because there are so many eyes on you. And most of the time, like, those crew people could care less. Like, they're there to do a job. They're there to hang a light. They're there to plug stuff in. They're there to like adjust dials and knobs and make sure that everything's in focus. They're focused on their job and trying to get it, trying to get the shot right, so that they can move on to something else, so that they can make their day. So even though that is the expectation from the crew, on the actor side, it's like, please only have the essential people on set, because it is a very vulnerable place to be, and having the bare minimum of people on set to accomplish this scene is very, very important. It's important to them to feel comfortable, to be able to relax. So I know I've been holding off on this subject for a very long time, but I knew I was going to have to come around to it eventually. And, like I said, me being still a bit immature, I'm a middle-aged man, but hey, I'm still immature. I don't think I'll ever grow up, and I mean, that's the reason why I'm in film. Like, it's like it's a job where you get to make believe, you get to daydream all day, you get to it's still a lot of work. It takes a lot of discipline and craft, but ultimately it's like I get to make stuff up for a living, and that is one of the greatest jobs ever. And it, like I said, it allows for this immaturity to kind of remain a bit prevalent in my own life. Not to the important things, obviously. Like, I'm grown up enough where I'm not, like I still take care of my responsibilities. But in terms of like, little jokes, I'm like, yeah, I still find that funny. I'm still gonna giggle. But yeah, anyway, bringing it back to the scenes, the sex scenes. It's like, especially, recently there have been shows like Game of Thrones where it's like there has been a lot of just a lot of sex, violence, gore. Like it goes all out. And especially, since Game of Thrones is an HBO show, and HBO has been known to just, push the push the envelope in terms of like what they're what they're able to do. And so usually you'll find like the most extreme stuff, within reason, without it going too far, on HBO. And you're starting to find it a bit more on Netflix as well, but HBO has kind of been like the forefront in terms of like of finding these kinds of scenes. But the question always comes down to, do you need to have this scene in your movie or your show? And that the answer to that question can be anything from, well, we want to have it in there because it will entice audiences to want to see it, or to want to pay to see it in a theater, or pay to be on the streaming site, because it is a business. Like, you're trying to put together something that is going to entice people to give over their hard-earned money to see what you've made. And the old saying, sex sells, and it does. Like, people will pay over and over and over again to watch it. And so to have those kinds of scenes in your work is seen as a plus, or it used to be seen as a plus. It probably still is, but it seems like nowadays, like, the industry is kind of like, I don't know where we are when it comes to like, sex in TV and film. Because on the one hand, it seems like it's like, yes, put it in there, but like make it the most extreme case, and like, like just put a lot of it. Or it's the opposite, where it's like, don't put anything that suggests like sexuality, like strip it all from sexuality. Like, no, there can't be any like handsome men or any like beautiful women. Just strip it all down to like to nothing. It can't be anything attractive or enticing, So I'm like, I don't know where we are in terms of that, but I do know it exists, because obviously like the HBO shows, like I'm always hearing about, like, there was a scene in there where this and this happened, and I'm like, oh wow, that they're really like pushing the envelope. Like, this is starting to get like borderline, like it's really pushing further beyond what has been on TV before. Or it's like pushing to where film used to be, and now film is kind of like backing off, and you don't see a lot of that in film anymore. You see it more in television. And so maybe it's just that things have kind of flip-flopped. Like, you see more sex scenes in television because, that's where all the good writing is, and that's where like people are they want to entice people to see more, to watch more television, as opposed to going to the movie theater, where going to the movies is more of a family thing. And so like they're trying to make like a lot of the films that you see in movie theaters more family oriented, and so they're trying to like not put anything sexy or like any kind of like sex in it, because it's like, no, the movie theaters where all the families go. They see all the Marvel movies and all the all the ones that like it makes the audience smaller when you put these kinds of scenes into your films. And so I can see how that is kind of like switched. So I don't know, guys. I really just wanted to kind of like just talk about this, kind of like get it out there. Just like I said, I knew I was gonna eventually have to come around to this subject, and it is still a question that we can ask ourselves every single time we're making something, because like if you're, it depends on what it is you're trying to make, and it depends on if it matters to the story. And sometimes, I mean, to be honest, sometimes it doesn't matter to the story at all. And there's nothing at stake except for the fact that, like, you're just throwing in a scene. And it shouldn't be that way. Like, if you're going to write a scene like that, it should be essential to one of the characters involved. There should be consequences and stakes involved. It should be something that, in a way mirrors the real world and doesn't really, I mean, it can still be kind of like hyper realized, because when you try to like mimic what happens in real life, it's like it's awkward. It doesn't always happen the way you think it's going to happen. It's like there's so many different factors that, if you put that into a show or to a movie, it's like it actually does like provide some realism, which is great. But sometimes people are going to the movies and watching these shows because they want a bit of fantasy. They want a bit of kind of like, in a perfect world, if this situation was to unfold, like it would be great if it unfolded like this, because it's it's enticing and it's hot, to be frank. So all right, guys, that's all I got for today. Once again, comment, subscribe, share, do all those things. Write me an email, hit me up on Twitter or on Facebook. Like, bring some questions, bring some comments, bring yourself to the table, and because I really want to include you in in these discussions, and to get your point of view on what it is that I'm talking about, because I really want to know like what other people think of like what it is I'm saying, and if it makes any sense. And if it doesn't make any sense, then I need to do a better job of being clear and concise, and making sure that what I'm talking about, that I can do a better job of this, is what I'm saying. So anyway, guys, like I said, that's all I got for today. I'll talk to you on the next one. And also, if you want to connect with me, I have an email for the podcast. It's tentative.title.with.tim.podcast@gmail.com. Also, I have a Twitter account for the podcast where I post episodes, and that is @title_Tim. And you can find also on the Facebook page, I have a page for the podcast, so you can connect with me there. Looking forward to hearing from all of you, and until then, I'll catch you on the next one.